He emptied our savings, gave my daughter's future to his mistress, and told me, over text, to good luck with rent. That's how he left. No goodbye, just a betrayal wrapped in a smile. Hi, I'm Sadie. I built a family from scratch, gave up my career to raise our daughter, and in return, I was erased by my husband, his new lover, and a mother-in-law who said I was never truly family. Have you ever been pushed out of your own life, like a guest overstaying their welcome? If the people you trusted tried to replace you, how far would you go to take your life back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to know, what would you have done? Let's go back to the moment I opened that message, and everything started to fall apart. You're not his wife anymore, Sadie. You're just occupying space. The words sliced through the hallway like a blade. I stood at the threshold of the house I had built, brick by damn brick, watching Brielle Sutton, Grant's mistress, carrying a vase I bought from our first anniversary trip. Her stilettos echoed on the hardwood floors like gunshots in a church. Behind her, Evelyn stood with her signature smirk, hands crossed, a silk scarf looped neatly around her neck like she was attending a charity luncheon, not an ambush. I clutched my keys, my bag, and all the dignity I had left. You're early, Grant said flatly, emerging from the kitchen with a manila envelope in hand. His eyes didn't even flinch at the sight of me. His suit was perfectly pressed, the same navy blazer I once had tailored for him. His voice was cold, rehearsed. This will be faster if we keep it civil. 9 years. 9 years of building this home, of sewing curtains, of repainting walls, of raising Luna, of forgiving late meetings, lipstick on collars, and gaslighting. And now I was being told I was occupying space, like a squatter in my own damn life. I thought you'd have the courtesy to do this somewhere other than here, I said. Brielle chuckled. Where else? This is our home now. She said it like a practice line. She wasn't just moving in. She was replacing me, inch by inch, item by item. Grant placed the envelope on the table between us. It's a peaceful separation agreement. Sign it within 72 hours and vacate the premises, he said. There's a small relocation sum enclosed. Evelyn's attorney will handle logistics. You mean your mother's attack dog, I muttered. I'm just trying to be reasonable, he replied. Then Evelyn stepped forward, her voice sickly sweet. Sadie, let's not make this more humiliating than it needs to be. You've always known this marriage was fragile. No, Evelyn, I said, jaw tight. You've always wanted it to be. She didn't respond, just pulled out a deed transfer paper, the one I had stupidly signed 3 years ago, transferring 51% of the house to Grant for refinancing convenience. You gave him majority ownership. Legally, you're a guest here, she said smoothly. And emotionally? I asked, but no one answered. Evelyn gave a nod, and Brielle stepped forward with a folded sheet in her hand. This outlines the visitation terms, she said, her voice syrupy. For Luna's stability, and per legal recommendation, you'll have 2 hours of contact per day, supervised by an approved third party. I blinked. You're restricting me from my daughter? It's temporary, Evelyn interjected smoothly. Until your mental state can be reassessed. We're doing what's best for Luna. My fists clenched, but I forced my voice to stay even. Best for Luna, or best for your narrative? From the stairs, Luna's soft humming drifted down. She was napping. Thank God she hadn't seen this yet. Brielle leaned in, mock sincere. We're keeping things stable for Luna. You'll still have visitation. 2 hours every other day, supervised, of course. I stared at them all, ball rising in my throat. Every lie, every manipulation, every dismissal over the years had led to this moment. But I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I didn't crumble. I walked to the study. Grant followed. What are you doing? He asked. Getting what's mine, I said calmly, sliding a USB from my bag. I opened his laptop. He hadn't changed the password. Still Luna 1026. He hovered behind me, but didn't stop me. Maybe he thought I was downloading photos. Let him. I copied everything. Emails, spreadsheets, folders labeled client development, Barcelona, tax structuring. Then I found it. Came in, Luna Fund 47. That file was password protected. I copied it anyway. You pushed me out, I said as I stood. Don't beg to be let in when I build the gate. As I turned toward the door, something flickered, an unwanted memory. Just 3 weeks ago, I had stood in this very kitchen baking Luna's 5th birthday cake. Brielle was there too, introduced as Daddy's work friend. She brought a bottle of wine. I made Luna's favorite grilled cheese sliders, and Evelyn sneered. You're still cooking like a college dorm mother? Grant had just smiled, silent as always. And I had smiled too, clinging to the illusion that this was still my family. Now, it felt like they'd just been waiting me out. Mrs. Janice, our housekeeper of 7 years, stood in the corner folding linen napkins into fans. Her hands paused when I passed. I stopped. You knew? I asked quietly. She hesitated, eyes flicking to where Evelyn stood in the hallway. They said you wouldn't be staying long. I nodded once. That was enough. Outside, the late afternoon light had lost its warmth. The door clicked shut behind me. A final punctuation. Not a single tear. Just the weight of a plan beginning to form. A child deserves stability. And clearly that isn't you. Those were Evelyn's first words as I entered the courtroom. She said it not to me, but loud enough that the entire gallery heard. I didn't react. I wouldn't give her the satisfaction. The courtroom was sterile and cold, polished wood, flickering fluorescents, and the muted tension of lawyers pretending not to hate each other. Grant wasn't present, of course. He never dirtied his hands when he had Evelyn to do the clawing. As I entered the courthouse, Brielle was already there, waiting. She wore a pearl hair clip and a rehearsed expression of concern. She stepped into my path. This isn't personal, Sadie, she said softly. It's just about what's best for Luna. I didn't blink. You don't get to say her name like you're her mother. Her smile faltered for a second before Evelyn emerged behind her, clipboard in hand. Brielle stepped aside, her eyes not quite meeting mine as I passed. I sat down beside Tessa Marlowe, my attorney. Her calm focus steadied me. You're ready, she whispered. I nodded. Let them try. 2 weeks ago, a court summons had arrived at my mailbox. Emergency custody petition. Evelyn Whitmore and Brielle Sutton were requesting temporary guardianship of my daughter, citing my history of psychological instability. It wasn't just a slap in the face, it was a calculated knife to the back. Back then, after Luna was born, I did go through postpartum depression. Evelyn had insisted on driving me to therapy. Now I knew why. She must have snapped pictures of intake forms, pill bottles, maybe even voice memos. She was collecting ammunition, not offering support. All rise, the bailiff called. Judge Randall, stern but composed, entered. We stood. My heart hammered. Brielle sat across from me, in an ivory blouse, legs crossed, a soft smile glued to her face like some magazine mom. Evelyn sat beside her, flipping through a folder with theatrical importance. As Evelyn droned on about emotional volatility, I let my eyes drift to Brielle. She kept her expression carefully neutral, but her fingers fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. She tugged it down, subtly, to cover a faint mark on her wrist, a tiny bruise, circular, like a blood draw. My breath slowed. Not your first time playing lab assistant, huh? Tessa rose. Your Honor, we object to this petition's premise and will address its evidentiary flaws in full. The judge gestured. Proceed. Evelyn stood first. Your Honor, as a grandmother, I am deeply concerned for Luna's welfare. Sadie has a history of emotional volatility. There was an incident. She locked herself in a room for hours, refusing to nurse. I flinched, but held still. She was prescribed antidepressants. Evelyn continued. We worry that Luna may be experiencing emotional neglect. Judge Randall turned to me. Ms. Whitmore, do you wish to respond? I stood, throat dry, but voice steady. Yes. I did suffer postpartum depression. I sought help. I recovered. And I've been raising Luna every day since, without incident. My current physician provided a report. He's here today if needed. Tessa handed over a folder. Verified, licensed, and current. The medication was temporary, and she's not taken any in over 2 years. The judge reviewed it carefully. Then I turned to Evelyn. You took me to therapy, I said, and now you use it as a weapon. Brielle shifted slightly. Her hand trembled just enough to catch my attention. A faint on her wrist bruise? Needle mark? And furthermore, I said, looking back at the bench, I request that the evidence provided by Evelyn be examined. I believe the documents were acquired improperly. Tessa stepped forward. We demand validation of chain of custody. No subpoenas were issued for these medical records. The judge frowned. Petitioner, please explain your evidence acquisition. Evelyn hesitated. Well, the documents were shared within the family. The courtroom shifted. That was a slip. Not legally admissible, the judge muttered. Clerk, strike from record. Brielle looked at Evelyn, eyes wide. The judge turned to me. Ms. Whitmore, thank you for your transparency. Petition for emergency custody is denied. I am also ordering an inquiry into unauthorized medical data handling. Court is adjourned. I exhaled. Camera shutters clicked. As I walked past Brielle, I whispered, You sure you want to keep playing for her team? Outside the courthouse, the wind hit me full in the chest. Luna ran up to me. Tessa had retrieved her from the daycare center next door. I hugged her tightly, breathing her in. Her curls pressed against my neck. I didn't cry. Not yet. Later, in the courthouse restroom, as I washed my hands, a woman in a maintenance uniform passed behind me and said softly, You just beat Evelyn Whitmore. Whole damn courthouse felt that. I smiled briefly. When I got back to my car, my phone buzzed. A blocked number. The message was simple. Meet me. I have what you need. B. He told you he was loyal? That's rich. He said the same to me while texting someone in Madrid. I watched the typing dots pulse under the burner email address I'd created just for this moment. I hadn't slept. Instead, I'd scoured old emails, flight logs, and tagged social photos until I found it. Grant, grinning next to a tall brunette outside the El Nacional in Barcelona, 2 weeks ago. He said it was a business trip. Of course he did. Brielle didn't reply for 8 minutes. When she did, it was short. Where? I sent the location tag, timestamp, and the photo, then added, I think it's time we talk. Just you and me. She agreed. The cafe was tucked into a rooftop alcove in the Pearl District, designed for discreet affairs and overpriced wine. I arrived first. Ordered a black coffee. I wouldn't drink. The rain left mist streaks on the glass. A hostess led Brielle in 5 minutes later. Her eyes had given it away days ago in that courtroom. When Evelyn had silenced her mid-sentence with a single glare, I'd seen the flicker. Fear. Resentment. Something she wasn't ready to name. I'd banked on that crack. She was still beautiful. Polished. But not untouched. The bags under her eyes betrayed sleepless nights. Her lips parted like she might launch into some PR apology, but I cut her off with a gesture. You've read the email. Saturday, it could be old. I leaned forward. It was last Thursday. Look at the jacket he's wearing. It's the same one you gifted him for his birthday. He packed it behind your back. That cracked her. I knew he was slippery, she said, voice tight. But I didn't know he was that bold. You knew enough to be scared. I pulled out the second file, a document titled Luna College Fund Disbursements. This is your name, I said, pointing to a recipient account. But the money isn't staying there. It's being rerouted every month into Evelyn's trust. Brielle stared at the paper like it might catch fire. She said it was for future tuition protection, that it had to be buffered from legal exposure. Legal exposure? I scoffed. You mean me? Her eyes flicked to the door. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for her purse. She's using you, I said quietly. Grant too. Neither of them intends to protect you if this goes down. And it will go down. She looked at me then. Really looked. What do you want? I don't need your loyalty, I said, sliding a clean USB across the table. I need your proof. She didn't touch it. Not right away. I recorded some of our strategy sessions, she murmured. Thought I'd need protection if things soured. Evelyn doesn't trust me. She thinks I'm a placeholder. You are, I said flatly. You're not his partner, Brielle. You're his placeholder until he finds the next opportunity. She flinched but nodded. I'll send you what I have. Tonight, I said. We're out of time. She reached into her purse, pulled out a small USB drive. Her hand trembled as she slid it across. It's password protected, she said. But I'll forward the access code. I want out of this. I pocketed it. Her hand trembled as she reached for her purse. A single bead of sweat slid down her temple. From behind the bar, the espresso machine let out a soft hiss, then the steady drip, drip, drip of coffee into a glass carafe. It was the kind of sound that fills silence with judgment. Later, outside, the street lights bled through the fog, casting everything in that soft emergency red glow. I walked alone. The ticking of time no longer metaphorical, real, rhythmic, audible in my chest. That night, the file came through. Barcelona Plan 2023, zip. I opened it slowly. Inside, a PDF of a Liechtenstein account titled Montera Holdings. A scanned letter addressed to Horizon Global, sent from a masked domain, making false allegations about me. And one image. Evelyn pouring champagne into 2 crystal flutes. Grant beside her, grinning. Final plan dinner. Inside the zipped folder, buried beneath spreadsheets and drafts of legal arguments, was one image. Evelyn pouring champagne into crystal flutes while Grant smiled next to her. A post-it was digitally tagged in the file, Final plan dinner. And as I stepped into the rain outside the cafe, it hit me like a curtain of ice. I didn't pull up my hood. Let the world see. A passing car's brake lights washed my face in red, like a warning or maybe an omen. An email below it, forwarded from Brielle's account. You promised I'd never be collateral, she had written. Grant hadn't replied. I closed the laptop and sat still. The clock ticked in the corner. Tick, tick, tick. You call it a toast. I call it a trap. The words didn't echo through the marble-floored foyer. They sliced through it, ice-cold and intentional. Evelyn Whitmore's smile twitched ever so slightly as her perfectly manicured hand gripped the champagne flute midair. She stood beneath the arched skylight of her West Hills mansion, bathed in soft golden light, her guests humming around her in designer suits and pearls. 50 guests. Local press. The grand piano whispered jazz in the corner. The so-called celebration of a new beginning was in full swing. She didn't expect me. 10 years ago, I had stood in this same house as a newlywed, trying to laugh along as Evelyn clinked glasses and said, "A good daughter-in-law knows when she's part of the family and when she's not the headline."
She hadn't changed.
She just upgraded the facade. Tonight, she raised her glass toward Grant and Brielle. To fresh starts. To leaving burdens behind. The room chuckled politely. To no more instability, she added, her eyes scanning the crowd, knowing they'd recognize the barb. To women who elevate, not unravel. I stepped through the French doors in black, matte silk, no frills. The room fell silent as the click of my heels punctuated her last word. Even the pianist faltered. "Sorry I'm late," I said coolly. Parking was murder.
Gasps.
Murmurs. Someone whispered my name. Grant's jaw clenched, but he didn't move. I walked to the center, pulled a USB from my clutch, and handed it to the AV technician standing beside the house soundboard. "Plug this in." Evelyn's voice filled the room, recorded and raw. "She'll fold eventually. Her file shows dependency. All we need is a medical referral to solidify it, then I can request emergency custody. We frame it as maternal concern." Then Grant's voice. "And once we're in Spain, she'll be nothing more than a holiday name on Luna's calendar." Silence. Evelyn stammered. That's out of context. Is it? I pulled a folder from my bag. "Let's provide some." I read aloud. "Luna College Fund. Monthly withdrawals. Destination. Evelyn Whitmore's trust account. Total to date, $46,200. 6 months. All documented."
Gasps again.
Phones emerged. I also have a fax from Horizon Global. Internal Security confirms a falsified identity report was sent to their ethics board. Link traced back to a proxy IP used from this very estate. The room tightened. "Evelyn," I said, turning toward her slowly, "you plotted in whispers." I came armed with echoes. A ripple ran through the crowd. Grant finally stepped forward, reaching for Brielle's hand. But Brielle pulled away. "She's telling the truth," Brielle said, voice shaking. "I helped them at first. I was scared, but it's all real." Cameras flashed. Reporters whispered. One of them raised a mic. "Miss Harper, are you pressing charges?" "I'm just getting started." Police entered from the side door, quiet but deliberate. Evelyn tried to backpedal. "That girl is unstable," she shrieked, pointing. "You're all being played." Everything slowed. The moment Evelyn screamed, "That girl is unstable." As the officers moved in, her voice cracked in the cavernous space, echoing off marble and fear. One officer took her by the wrist. The other clicked open the cuffs. The motion of her flailing arm, the flash of silver metal, it all moved as if submerged underwater. And as I turned to leave, the chandelier's warm light cut across the folds of my black dress, sharp, exact, like a blade being drawn. Guests parted like water. Phones recorded everything. From the staircase landing, Luna watched silently through the window upstairs. She didn't cry. She simply watched, clutching the stuffed giraffe I'd sewed for her second birthday. Outside, chaos waited. The front gates had opened. Reporters swarmed forward like a tidal wave. Flashes went off in rapid succession. One cameraman nearly tripped over the stone fountain as officers led Evelyn through the front steps. Her face twisted, half hidden behind her cuffed hands. Microphones collided midair. "Is it true you stole from your granddaughter? Was this about custody or control? Ms. Whitmore, any comment on the Horizon leak?" The roar swallowed her. "She flipped the whole night with one USB," a guest murmured, stunned. And I wasn't done. I turned to Grant, his lips parted, panic creeping in. "You're next," I whispered. "I just wanted your mother to watch." I walked out without looking back. Light sliced across my black dress like a blade. The night had started with a toast, but it ended with a reckoning. Your reputation was built on silence. I gave it a microphone. The cursor blinked at the end of my closing sentence. I hovered over the button for exactly 3 seconds before clicking send. I remembered the time Evelyn made me cancel a television interview right before my first children's book launched. Families shouldn't air their linen on camera, she said, smiling that tight, rehearsed smile. Especially not when your voice might shake. I nodded then. Buried the offer. But not the memory. The screen pulsed. The moment my finger pressed send, the screen flickered, casting a sharp white glow across my eyes. The silence was total until a high-pitched whoosh signaled dispatch. Then came the pounding pulse of a rising soundtrack in my head. Urgency. Release. War drums in code. Then the file was gone, zipped and encrypted, in the inbox of the lead editor at Justice Echo, an independent media site known for publishing stories no one else dared touch. Attached were over 60 documents, bank statements, voice recordings, faxes, internal HR emails from Horizon Global, and the crown jewel, video of Evelyn admitting she fabricated parts of my medical record to manipulate a custody battle. I included a brief letter. Not a sob story. A roadmap. Sadie Whitmore. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. This is Rowan Chase, editor-in-chief at Justice Echo. I need to know you're real. I'm more than real, I said. I have everything.
A beat.
Then you just detonated Portland's most pristine reputation. We met the next morning at their office, a converted floor of a half-condemned newspaper building. Brick walls, humming servers, boxes of FOIA requests stacked to the ceiling. Rowan's team moved fast. By noon, their lead article was live. How the Whitmores Tried to Steal a Daughter. Subheadline: Abuse of Power, Stolen Funds, and the Anatomy of Maternal Erasure. Within 3 hours, it was trending nationwide. #Justice for Sadie overtook Twitter. My inbox overflowed. Reporters, legal firms, even university deans wanting to amplify my voice. But I wasn't interested in being a symbol. Not yet. I had one more move to make. That evening, Horizon Global released a public statement. We are aware of allegations involving Grant Whitmore, former director of global marketing. Effective immediately, Mr. Whitmore has been placed on administrative leave pending further investigation into offshore accounts and misconduct. It was clinical, cold, lethal. By morning, the Portland School Board issued a notice that Evelyn had voluntarily stepped down from her governance position. Her legacy, once synonymous with charity brunches and educational reform, now trailed whispers of identity theft and fraud. I sat at my kitchen table, coffee cooling beside me. Luna played on the rug nearby, building a Lego house far sturdier than the one her father had tried to fake for us. Then the call came. Sadie, said Anna, my lawyer. Grant's at PDX. Trying to board a flight to Zurich. We're filing an emergency hold with Homeland Security now. I grabbed my coat. On the airport screens, my story was playing. A looped segment of the article headline, cut with stills of Evelyn mid-shriek, and Grant looking ashen beside her. At Terminal D, Grant stood in a designer trench, rolling suitcase beside him. He was checking his passport when 2 uniformed officers appeared behind him. The gate agent looked confused, then nodded. Mr. Whitmore? The taller officer asked. Grant frozen. I'm late for. You're not going anywhere.
Flash. Flash. Flash.
Paparazzi had arrived. Someone whispered his name. Someone else pointed to the TV screen. As Grant stood frozen between the 2 officers, I saw the passengers near him begin to murmur. A woman tugged her son closer. A man in business attire glanced at the screen, then back at Grant, and took 2 steps away. The crowd wasn't angry. They were embarrassed for him. Or maybe of him. Grant's eyes darted around. And for the first time, I saw it.
Shame.
Everyone turned away. Outside, I exhaled. The air was crisp, the kind of cold that felt earned. Back home, Luna crawled into my lap, held up her drawing. "Mommy, are you famous now?" I kissed her temple. "Only the good kind, baby." My phone dinged. An email from one of the country's biggest talk shows. "We'd love to have you on next week to share your journey." Another buzz. "Anna again. He'll be in court tomorrow. Front row's yours." Before I closed my inbox that night, one last message caught my eye. No subject line. No name. It read, "I was forced to pull my daughter from Lincoln High 3 years ago because I questioned Evelyn's vote to cut arts funding. She called my job, threatened to expose my instability. You didn't just save yourself. You saved the rest of us who never had your voice. Thank you." I stared at the screen for a long time before hitting archive. Not delete. Just save. Later, after Luna had gone to bed, I sat with my laptop in silence. The glow of the Justice Echo page still lit the screen. A tab hovered behind it, an old folder labeled Memories. I clicked. Photos flicked by. Luna's first birthday, her first day of preschool, messy pancake mornings. And then it came, the wedding. Grant in a gray tux. Me under that stupid lilac arch Evelyn insisted on. Our hands linked like it meant forever. I hover, then hit delete. No hesitation. The recycle bin chimed. Quiet. Final. They tried to erase me. Now I'm the headline. The courthouse didn't feel like justice. It felt like aftermath. Cold, clean, polished like nothing messy had ever happened within its walls. But something had. My name had been dragged through these halls, my motherhood questioned, my identity dissected. As I stood there, listening to the judge's ruling, a memory surfaced. Evelyn's voice years ago at my baby shower, soft but cutting. A daughter-in-law is never truly family. Not by blood, not by bond, she said while fixing a centerpiece. You'll understand someday. She'd smiled then, like it was a kindness. I understand now, just not the way she intended. And now I stood in front of the judge again. Miss Sadie Whitmore is hereby granted sole physical and legal custody of Luna Whitmore, the judge declared, voice resolute. Mr. Grant Whitmore is restricted from international travel for 24 months and ordered to attend financial restitution hearings. Tessa squeezed my shoulder. My breath caught, then released in a single, solid exhale. Evelyn didn't even lift her head. In the back row, Grant sat with his hands clasped, face hollow, eyes bloodshot. The navy suit he wore once screamed control. Today, it hung on him like consequence. They had nothing left to say. The next day, headlines swept across the city again. But this time, the news wasn't mine to carry alone. Ex-school board member indicted for identity fraud and offshore embezzlement. Evelyn's name was officially on the docket. I received an offer, $250,000 in reputational compensation. Their lawyers phrased it as closure, an olive branch after a war they'd lost. I didn't hesitate. Redirect it, I told Tessa. Put it into a scholarship fund for single mothers returning to school.
Tessa blinked,
then smiled. Outside the courthouse, the wind had softened. I looked up at the Portland skyline. Not grand, not intimidating, just real. Like something being reclaimed. 2 weeks later, I took Luna to see our new home. The elevator chimed as we stepped into the 5th-floor condo. Warm wood floors. Open windows. Art hooks waiting to be filled. My old desk near the kitchen. On the balcony, a row of flower pots I hadn't touched yet. Luna darted into her room. Soft pink walls, a rainbow sticker still being peeled by gravity. "Mommy," she called. "There's sunlight on my pillow." There was sunlight everywhere. She returned and wrapped her arms around me. "Is this our forever house?" I knelt to her eye level. "As long as we choose it to be." She smiled wide, her two front teeth slightly crooked. My favorite imperfection in the world. That night, she colored on the living room floor as I unpacked a crate labeled studio. I found my favorite brush buried inside, still stained with hues from another lifetime. The morning sun spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting a warm gold hue across the studio wall. It caught Luna's newest painting, an abstract sunburst, messy and brilliant, and set it aglow. A single piano note echoed from the speaker behind me. Just melody. No words. It filled the room with something I hadn't heard in years.
Peace.
I placed the brush on the new easel by the window. The voice from the talk show still echoed in my inbox. "We'd be honored to have you share your story." But I already had. The justice wasn't in the airtime. It was in this moment, in a home where no one walked on eggshells or measured their voice. Where no one erased me. I sat, brush in hand, canvas blank. A soft piano played from my phone. "We don't just survive betrayal," I'd told the reporter. "We re-architect everything it tried to break." As Luna's giggles rang behind me, I heard the frame of her newest drawing fall gently from the window pane. Earlier that week, I spotted a local paper tucked beside my mailbox. The editorial headline read, "Silence is no longer a solution." The byline simply read, SW. I walked over to the window, brushing Luna's curls from her eyes. She'd hung a tiny wooden frame above her bed. On it, painted in her shaky handwriting, "We're enough." I stared at it longer than I meant to, then realized she had titled it with the same name I whispered in court. She remembered. On its glass, etched in gold leaf, were the words, "We're enough." Somewhere in the distance, a ping. An email. From unknown@heartmailed.net. Subject, "Your story saved me." Message, "Thank you for being loud when I couldn't be." I smiled. Quietly. I turned back to the easel and picked up the brush again. This is where it begins again. I live in a home I chose, with sunlight on the walls and laughter in the air. No shadows from the past, no voices trying to rewrite my story, just peace, earned and unapologetic. I am no longer surviving. I am standing. When people try to bury you in shame, remember this. Dignity doesn't fade under pressure, it sharpens. Justice isn't loud, but when it lands, it leaves echoes. The truth doesn't need permission to exist. Have you ever been forced to rebuild after someone tried to erase you? Share your story in the comments. I want to hear how you rose. Someone out there might need your voice the way I once needed mine. And if this journey spoke to you, wait until you see what I paint next.